Let's understand today how the enemies of the latest Apocalyptic Shadow work. The first note, we got the bug. And as you can see, the bugs have stacks. So, why do these stacks exist? What's their importance? Well, the reason of these stacks in Apocalyptic Shadow is to enhance the small bugs. So to enhance these small bugs. Since every stack a small bug has, their attack will be increased. So this small bug has one stack, so that means for every stack he has, it will give him increased attack percentage. But the big bug doesn't get attack percentage from these stacks. And we'll get to a moment why he has those stacks to begin with. Alright, so we know every stack a small bug has, their attack gets increased, so the attack percentage. But there's also another thing. If a small bug has 3 stacks, what happens then is that they get the extra ability. Well, these small bugs, which are only available in the first phase, the extra ability they get when they have 3 stacks is that their attacks can now entangle you. So what does entangle do then? When a bug attacks you and applies entangle on you, that means that your action will be delayed and you will be entangled. That means you cannot do anything until you get your turn again. But there is also another type of bug which only spawns in the second phase, and that is these bugs, the bomb bugs. So let's say he has 3 stacks. The extra ability he will get is that he will immediately gain an action. Well, why is that bad? Well, when a bomb bug gets his first turn, he will go into a charging state, and then his next turn he will explode on you and has a chance to apply outrage on you. So if he gets his first turn, he's charging, he gets 3 of those stacks, he gets another turn immediately, and he will explode on you and potentially apply outrage on you. And what does outrage mean? That means you cannot do anything apart from default basic attacks for 2 turns consecutively. So that means you need to have cleansers in your team or high effect resistance. So alright, now we know the small bugs getting stacks is bad. But how do they gain these stacks to begin with then? Well, there are 2 ways these small bugs can gain stacks. The first way is when the big bug gets a turn when he has stacks. And when he has those stacks, when he gets a turn, he will distribute them among all the bugs on the field. And luckily for us, the stacks on the big bug don't do anything for him, so he doesn't get an extra bonus ability or attack percentage. And like I said, there are 2 ways. The second way small bugs can gain stacks is every 1 or 2 times a small bug spawns. So they will just spawn with default 1 stack, as you can see here, like this bug in the second phase. But it can also happen in the first phase, that the bug just spawns with 1 stack. But alright, we know that the big bug has the ability to give his stacks to the small bugs, but how does the big bug himself then gain those stacks? Well, he gains stacks at the end of his turn always. In the first phase, as you can see here, he will always gain 4 stacks at the end of his turn. But in the second phase, the first turn he gets, he will also gain 4 stacks. But on his second turn, in the second phase, he will gain 10 stacks now. And then the third turn, he will gain at the end of his turn 4 stacks again, and the fourth turn, he will gain 10 stacks again. So alright then, we know that the big bug having stacks and the small bugs having stacks is bad. So how do we remove the stacks from the big bugs and small bugs? Well, for the small bugs, you cannot directly remove the stacks, unfortunately. So you just need to kill them. But since the main income for the small bugs, their stacks, is the big bug, since he gets a stack at the end of his turn, and when he gets a turn, the big bug, while he has still stacks, he will distribute them. So how do we make sure he doesn't have any stacks when his turn starts? Is by killing the small bugs. So every time you kill a small bug, that means 1 stack will be removed from the stacks of the big bug. So that means we continuously want to kill small bugs to make sure that the big bug doesn't have any stacks when his turn starts. So doesn't distribute them to the small bugs, so they don't gain the increased attack percentage. And in the worst case scenario, they shouldn't even be allowed to gain the 3 stacks, since they get the bonus ability, which will make sustaining a lot harder. So alright, we know we want to kill the small bugs continuously to make sure that the big bugs, his stacks, get reduced, to make sure the small bugs don't get the stacks from the big bug. Another reason why we want to kill the small bugs continuously is when they die, they apply also to everyone on the field a vulnerability debuff. So that means killing the small enemies will become easier the whole time. And of course, those vulnerability debuffs will stack up on the big bug. So killing him will also be easier. But also another reason why we want to kill the small bugs, what the whole Apocalyptic Shadow is even about, is to make sure that we can reduce the toughness bar of the big bug a bit faster. Since if the boss hits toughness bar, so the big bug, his toughness is reduced to 0, he will get increased damage, so we can kill him in the time period. So when a small bug dies, what also happens is that the explosion also reduces the toughness of the boss, so the main bug, like by around 25%. The toughness. Well, exactly 25% to be precise. Since the actual toughness it reduces from the boss is 50, and luckily it reduces by so much because this whole toughness bar of the boss is 200 toughness in total. And as we can see, he has 3 toughness bars, you might say. So it is actually 600 in total. But how much is this 50 toughness reduction compared to your attacks? So this minus 25% of 1 bar. Well, most AoE attacks of your characters reduce around 20 toughness, which is just 10%. So that means killing those small bugs will make your life way easier in reducing the toughness bar of the main bug. And for the small 4-star Herta, her skill, for example, reduces just 10 toughness, and for single target ultimates like Aventurian's ultimate reduces 30, which is luckily a bit more. But the main way is by killing the small bugs to reduce the toughness of the boss. So if you went for a full single target DPS and you didn't touch the toughness bar of the big bug at all, then you need to kill 12 small bugs in total to weakness break him. But I highly doubt a situation like that will arise since you got blast attacks, AoE attacks from your supports or sub DPSs. So you don't need to kill 12 small bugs in total. But your main way of reducing the toughness of the main bug will be the small bugs. And when the big bug, his toughness is reduced to 0, so all the 3 toughnesses have been reduced to 0, then the big bug will get increased damage, of course. That is what the whole Apocalyptic Shadow is about, to DPS him down in that time period when his weakness broken. But also what happens is, every small bug on the field will also get weakness broken, which happens both in the first and second phase of the bug. So that's another nice thing that happens when the boss is weakness broken. So now that we know that we want to continuously weakness break the small bugs, favorably with AoE DPSs or blast DPSs. But another reason why we really continuously want to kill the small bugs is that in the second phase, on the second turn of the big bug, so when he gets his 10 stacks at the end of that turn, he will enter into a toughness locked state, as you can see, which you might have already noticed when you have played this Apocalyptic Shadow. So this means the only way to reduce the toughness of this big bug is now by killing the small bugs. But luckily, this locked toughness will become unlocked again when he gets his third turn, so the turn after he locked his toughness. But still, it is quite a long time. So having that fundamental thing of continuously weakness breaking the small bugs will really help you a lot by clearing this Apocalyptic Shadow. So now we know that we really need to kill a lot of small bugs. That also means we need to have a good small bug income. So we need to continuously get the small bugs to reduce the stacks of the bug, but also to even weakness break him. So how can we make sure that we get the small bugs continuously then? When do they spawn? And luckily there is an automatic income of the small bugs, since every time you attack the big bug, a small bug will spawn if there is room. So let's say I do a big AoE attack here and only this small bug right here dies. So this small bug right here only dies and the other ones live. That means a bug will not spawn since there is no room, because I just did an attack. So let's say I did basic attack of Jade here, I attacked him, and he died. And of course it's a brass attack, the basic attack, so he got a bit of damage, and also the bug got a bit of damage from Jade's basic attack. So I attacked the big bug. But a bug will not spawn since it will spawn immediately. And since there is no room, even though I killed this bug right here, right now, but still, he still needs to explode. There is no room for the small bug to spawn. But if there were 3 small bugs on the field and I attack the big bug, then a small bug will spawn. That's what you need to know. So when you're like, I did a big Herta AoE enhanced kill here and every small bug on the field died, but not a single bug spawned, that is because there was no room when you did that big AoE attack, since the max space on the field is 5. And now we have already 5 enemies on the field. And unfortunately, the damage that the bugs do when they die doesn't count as an attack. So if that big AoE attack from Herta's enhanced kill killed all these small bugs and they explode, so they damage the big bug a lot of times, but it doesn't count as an attack. So only one attack would have been counted, and that is Herta's ult attack. But since there is no room in the first place because it is full, not a single bug will spawn. But luckily for us, in the second phase, if there is room for bugs to spawn, 2 bugs at that time will spawn. So if there were just 2 bugs on the field, and we say these didn't exist, and I attack the main bug, then that means 2 bugs will spawn now. But in the first phase, if there is room, so let's say this bug doesn't exist, and I attack the big bug, only one bug will spawn at that time. So even if this bug didn't exist either, and this bug didn't exist either, then still one bug will spawn when I hit him, when I hit the big bug once. So in the first phase, one bug will spawn at a time. In the second phase, two bugs will spawn at a time. So that is your bug income. But there's also another way bugs will spawn, and that is when this big bug does like attack, and blue bug like this one will spawn. But that is not really your main way of bug income. You just want to make sure you continuously do nice AoE or blast attacks on the big bug and the small bugs to make sure they die the whole time. And you have that nice small bug income to continuously reduce the big bugs. Toughness bar to stack up vulnerability debuffs on him, to reduce the stacks of the big bug so he doesn't distribute them on the small bugs when he gets a turn. So that's your wall flow basically. Continuously kill small bugs while also attacking the big bug the whole time, so you have that nice bug income for your next attack to kill those bugs. But unfortunately with bosses who have multiple phases like this, is that when you have reduced that HP to 0 and they go to this second phase, they will lose all the debuffs they have on them. So if you had like stacked 10 vulnerability debuffs on the big bug, when they go to the second phase, all those vulnerability debuffs would have been gone. But luckily, the bugs explode after you have transitioned to the second phase, if any bugs had died in the first phase. So if, for example, I did a big AoE damage and I killed the big bug and all the small bugs on the field in the first phase, then luckily, first we will transition to the second phase, and then the small bugs will explode, which will make our life way easier in killing the bug of this second phase. And also luckily, when we did that big AoE damage and we killed all the small bugs, but the big bug had just 1 HP left, and the small bug explodes and does damage to everyone, but on the big bug it does like 0.75% damage if he is not weakness broken. If the big bug was weakness broken and the small bug explodes, then it would do like around 3% or 4% damage to the big bug. So if you say all the small bugs on the field have died when we did a big AoE attack and the big bug had 1 HP left, and we say, well, 1% HP, and he is weakness broken, so we kill him, then it means we got 3 explosions left, and luckily these 3 explosions will carry over to the next phase. So this bug will kill the big bug, but these 3 bugs will explode in the second phase, luckily for us. So you don't have to worry about overkilling the big bug with the small bug, his explosions. So what are some restart guidelines for the first node to make sure that you can get all the rewards before the Apocalyptic Shadow refreshes? Well, the first restart guideline I have is when a bug entangles you. So when does a bug entangle you? Well, for the small bugs, he has a chance to entangle you when he has 3 stacks and attacks you. And this big bug also has a chance to entangle you with the single target ability he got. But why is this entanglement bad for us? Why should we restart? Well, when you get entangled, your action will be delayed and you cannot do anything until you get your turn. So even if you cleanse your entanglement on yourself, your action would have still been delayed. So if an important ally gets entangled, that means your run wouldn't go that smooth anymore. Sure, if for example Ronmei gets entangled after she had just casted her ult and skill, sure you can afford that. But if your DPS gets entangled, even if you cleanse it, she still would have been pushed down, that DPS, which means DPS loss. When is another time you can restart for the first node? Well, that is when this bomb bug applies outrage on you and you cannot cleanse it immediately. And when does he apply outrage on you? When he gets his second turn. So his first turn he charges, on his second turn he will explode on you and apply outrage, and that outrage is a blast attack. And what does outrage do? Well, that means you cannot do anything for 2 turns apart from automatically basic attacking basically. So if you got no reactive cleanse when you got outraged, that means it's recommended to restart. Since you got unlucky, your effect resistance was too low, or you didn't have a Lucha, for example, we could immediately cleanse that outrage on you, or you got the links who can cleanse it, that's possible too. But you don't even want to get to the point where the bomb bug explodes on you. So continuously weakness breaking these bugs is a fundamental thing in this site. So now let's understand how Phantylia works. Well, the first thing you might have noticed with Phantylia is these timer stacks you got here. Well, what do these timer stacks do? Why do they exist? Why are they important for us? Well, what they do is this. If Phantylia gets her turn, she will reduce 1 stack of this count. So -1 every time she gets a turn. If she gets a turn and it becomes 0, then she will summon lotuses. And then after she has summoned those lotuses, the count will start again from 3. And she will lose -1 every turn she gets until she has 0 again and summon lotuses again if able. And when you look at the lotuses, you can see that they have these weird icons above their head. And what these icons mean is this. For the yellow lotus, when you kill it the first time, so in the first phase, the first turn, you have this layout, so a purple and a yellow lotus. Both of these icons are highlighted. When you kill a lotus, you will have that damage bonus for the rest of this battle against Phantylia. So when I kill this lotus, my whole team will gain a buff. The buff that this yellow lotus will give is, to the whole team, is just a damage bonus. So your allies will just do more damage. When I kill this purple lotus, then my whole team will gain super break damage. So it is a decision we need to make. Do we want to get damage bonus for the whole fight against Phantylia, even for the second phase? Or super break damage for the whole fight against Phantylia? Well, it depends on your team. When you run a super break team, just go for super break lotus. If you go for like an Acheron team or Yingguang team, go for a damage bonus. It is basically as simple as that. And luckily, this damage bonus can be stacked every time we skill the same lotus. So if we go to this side, we can see I chose for the purple lotus, I get super break damage. And every time I now kill a red lotus, I will get one stack of this thing here, right here. And as you can see, I have 3, so that means I've already killed 3 purple lotuses. So that means I now have a lot of break damage. And to go back, it is not super break damage, it is specifically increased break damage, not super break. So increased break damage or increased damage bonus. And we chose here for the increased break damage. And we got 3 stacks because I have killed 3 purple lotuses. And as you can see, the yellow lotuses don't have this icon anymore. So after we have killed this red lotus, this thing won't be available anymore. So you need to make a decision. Alright, now we know this. Another thing that might come to your mind is, so nice, I get break damage or extra damage bonus. I need to choose one for the rest of the battle. But how do I reduce the toughness of Phantylia? Since her toughness is, as you can see, locked. Well, to be able to reduce the toughness of Phantylia, you need to kill a lotus. So when I defeat a lotus, so let's say we kill this lotus, now Phantylia's bar won't be locked anymore. So it will be just lighted up. So now we can reduce the toughness of Phantylia. But luckily, also, what happens when you kill a lotus is that will also reduce directly the toughness of Phantylia by a little bit. And it will reduce the toughness like around 14%. It is not that much, but still pretty much appreciated. And in numbers, that is like 55 toughness, which is more than the bug. So weakness break Phantylia should be a little bit easier. So we know now killing the lotuses will allow us to reduce the toughness of Phantylia, and it will also directly reduce the toughness of Phantylia by a little bit. But the thing is, we need to keep in mind is, Phantylia's toughness bar will be locked again when she summons lotuses. And when will she summon lotuses? When the count of this thing goes to 0. Then she will summon lotuses again. So that means we want to continuously kill lotuses to be able to reduce the toughness bar of Phantylia. Another reason why you want to continuously kill the lotuses is this. When you kill a lotus, it will also, depending on which lotus you kill, give your allies a small advantage. For the yellow lotus, so if you remove this thing, the yellow lotus, when you kill it, it will give your whole team plus 10 energy. It is not a lot, but still appreciate it. When you kill a purple lotus, it will regenerate your HP a little bit. Also, remove all the debuffs on your team. And luckily it does this, since the attacks of these purple lotuses like give you a debuff which makes it so that your max HP is like reduced by 25% or something. So when you kill him, that debuff will be removed since it removes all the debuffs on your allies and also heal you a little bit. And these buffs always happen when you kill these lotuses. And now regarding the second phase of Phantylia, the special thing is that she doesn't have these stacks anymore. So these stacks will be gone and she will have a different mechanic. Since in the first phase the stacks were cycling, so she would be getting 3 stacks the whole time when it got reduced to 0. And every time she switches like colors. So when this one becomes 0, she will go to purple mode. When this one goes to 0, like go to 0, she will go to this mode and it will like cycle the whole time. But for the second phase, lotuses spawn only when the lotuses themselves get a turn. So as you can see in the action bar right here, after these lotuses got a turn and they all basically get their turn at the same time, after that turn, they will just respawn even if they're at like 1 HP. Another way is, when lotuses respawn is when Phantylia gets a turn and all the lotuses on the field were defeated. So if all the lotuses on the field were defeated and Phantylia gets a turn, then she will also spawn lotuses. The first time in the second wave, she will like spawn 2 of each lotus. But in her second action, when those lotuses got their turn or got defeated, she will spawn 4 lotuses of the damage bonus you chose. So I chose for the break damage one here. So she will now spawn 4 lotuses with that chosen buff. And for her third turn, she will spawn again 2 of each lotus. And for the fourth turn, she will spawn only the lotuses of the buff you haven't chosen. So you don't get any stacks for the damage bonus. By that time, she should already have been dead. And the thing you might have noticed with the second phase is that your allies now have like this lock on them. What do these locks mean? Well, these locks are related to the action these lotuses get. As you can see in the sidebar, the lotuses are all highlighted in red, and we see all our allies are locked. So when these lotuses gain a turn while allies are locked, the lotus will do damage to the corresponding locked ally. So which lotus has locked which ally then? From my test, I had seen that this lotus has locked this ally and this one. That is basically the opposite one on the field. And the more locked allies when the lotuses get their turn, the more damage they will do. So if you're like, damn, my Royal Main is really squishy, I don't want her to get damage, how can we make sure then to remove this lock? Well, you can remove the locks on allies when you weakness break the corresponding lotus. So when I weakness break this lotus, that means this lock will go. But what I noticed is that when I had like one downed character in my team and there were 4 lots on the field and they lock onto the characters, it doesn't happen with this opposite side anymore. It like goes randomly. So at the point I had like 4 locks onto my Royal May and none on Firefly and Fugue. But when a character offer gets downed, you would have already restarted. But in the most cases, the lotuses lock onto the target opposite of them. But if it seems like that isn't the case, it doesn't matter since you always want to make sure you continuously kill the lotuses to get, of course, the damage bonus tax, but also to get the energy and HP and remove all debuffs on you and reduce Phantylia's toughness bar. Since when you kill a lotus, you're now able to reduce the toughness bar of Phantylia, so it won't be locked anymore, and it will directly reduce toughness bar by like 14%. But also another reason to kill the lotuses is that it also always in phase 1 and in phase 2 reduces the HP of Phantylia by like around 3 to 4%, always, which is pretty nice. So if I kill like all these followers on the field, Phantylia's HP would have been reduced by 12 or 16%. Always appreciated. And just like with the big boss, when Phantylia gets totally weakness broken, all the lotuses on the field will also get weakness broken. So that means everyone will lose their locks on them automatically. So you don't have to worry about anyone suddenly dying. And hereby also some guidelines for you on when to restart if you cannot manage to get all the points for this Apocalyptic Shadow before it refreshes. Well, for Phantylia, the first time I recommend you to restart is when she does this single target attack, which is guaranteed to delay the action of an ally of yours. So sometimes she does this attack, which like delays the action of, let's say, if Firefly is attacked, guaranteed. So even though you have like a billion effect resistance, it will delay the action of Firefly, guaranteed. If it happens to Firefly, it's bad. I'd recommend to restart, since now your Firefly might have missed an extra attack which she could have done before she got out of combustion state. So if she got like attacked by that single target attack which delays your action, Firefly would have been pushed like here. Maybe not, depending how much speed she had. But if it happens on, for example, a Royal May, I can still afford it. Only if Royal May had just cost her skill and ultimate, because it's no biggie, since someone needs to get hit by the single target attack, which delays your action guaranteed. But it should not happen to an important character like Firefly. And she also has that guaranteed to delayed action attack in her second phase, which is an AoE attack, but you cannot do anything about that since it's an AoE attack. Everyone will get their action delayed by a little bit. So we just got to fight through that one. But regarding the single target attack which delays your action, it's just RNG. You got to hope that it doesn't happen to Firefly or someone else important. When is another time I'd recommend you to restart this? Well, that is when this yellow lotus reduces the energy of an important ally the whole time. Since this yellow lotus, when it gets a turn, what it does is it reduces the energy of a single ally by 5. Which is not a lot, true, but if it continuously targets an important ally the whole time, these lotuses, by -5 the whole time, it will stack up. And if it happens to an important ally like, let's say, Firefly, who really is ult dependent, and I got like 1 energy left to ult, well, that's just unlucky, since you just got targeted the whole time. It's just unlucky, RNG. So if it happens the whole time, I recommend you to restart. When it happens on an important ally specifically. If it happens on Lucha or Fugue, I can afford it here and there, but not on important allies or bad timings. Let's say it happens on Pella the whole time. We just needed her ult before Acheron's ult, since you want to cast Acheron's ult after Pella's ult or after Jiao's ult. If it happens at bad timings or someone gets singled out the whole time, it's just unlucky. So if you're on Acheron team, you need to hope that happens on Acheron the whole time, since Acheron got no energy. So that 5 energy reduce won't do anything to her. So it's just basically unlucky RNG again. But I do want you to remember this though. You can play with 3B in this Apocalyptic Shadow for a couple of days, since 3B releases on the 26th of February, assumed. If Honkai Star Rail keeps up that cycle that every 42 days a new version drops. But if you're still unsure whether you want to summon for 3B or not, because you want to see who is going to come in version 3.2, well, the drip marketing for version 3.2 should happen around the 11th of February, if it also happens every 42 days, since with Honkai Star Rail everything happens around every 42 days. So if you're still unsure whether you want to summon for 3B or not, or even for Aglia or not, which will also come on the 5th of February, you can make a more educated decision on the 11th of February when the drip marketing starts. But of course, we still don't know 3B's official kit yet, so that means we need to wait on the livestream, and luckily the livestream will be on the 14th of February. So you can also make a more educated decision then. Since this Apocalyptic Shadow, the last day will be on Sunday, the March the 2nd. So that means you can play with 3B, you can play with Aglia and all her reruns. You can make a more educated decision when a drip market for 3.2 drops and the livestream drops. And hell, maybe you will win that lucky prize where 20 people will win 500k Jade. So like 3,125 pulls. So if you win that one, you will be set for life on Honkai Star Rail. And until the end of this Apocalyptic Shadow, there will be even coming lots of double relic drops, lots of double trace drops, lots of events which will make building up your characters a bit easier. So my point is basically, which I will always say, is you don't need to make haste. You still got a lot of time before this Apocalyptic Shadow ends. The focus is to just get all your rewards for this Apocalyptic Shadow before it refreshes. You can finish this Apocalyptic Shadow with any character basically, depending how many retries you want to do. If you don't like to do the retries, then don't. It's all about what is fun for you. You like to go full 4-star team, do it. You want to zero cycle, do it. You want to go sustainless or whatever you can come up with, do it. Just do what makes you enjoy Honkai Star Rail the most. That is what games is all about. So no stress. You got lots of time. I thank you for paying attention and I see you the next time. Bye.